welcome everybody who's decided to join us, and thanks for being here with us today. I'm so excited to have you here. And as I mentioned before, if you'd like to turn on your video so that we can all feel like we're a little more together, we'd love to see your faces. So I'm just thrilled to be here with all of you today to talk about something that's close to my heart, which is women's empowerment. And clearly an important issue. More than half the world is women. And so if we, how can we build an inclusive and prosperous society if half of the world is left behind? Of course, this is a topic that is close to the hearts of this entire panel, so many of whom are working on this important issue. So many countries in the world, even countries in the developed world, struggle with this problem of disproportionately burdening women with policy and cultural and societal barriers that prevent them from making the choices to determine their own life's course. And so I'm just delighted to be here with such a distinguished panel from women in Africa who are leading efforts in order to empower women across the continent and their communities. So I'm delighted to introduce 4 speakers today. First, I'll introduce Fabienne Medura. She joins us from the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And she is part of the Center for Development and Enterprise's DRC team in the Great Lakes region. So welcome, Fabienne. We're so happy to have you here with us. And then we'll also next welcome Linda Kavuka. She joins us from Nairobi, Kenya. And many of you, of course, know her from her work across the entire continent with Students for Liberty. I think people refer to her as Mama Liberty sometimes, although maybe I'm wrong about that. I think I remember that being the case. And next I'll introduce Monia Wakana. She is joining us from Burundi, where she manages the communications efforts at the Center for Development and Enterprises Great Lakes. Welcome, Monia. We're so glad to have you here. And then finally, just delighted to have the CEO of the Nkafu Policy Institute, which is part of the Dennis and Lenora Ferretia Foundation in Cameroon. So welcome to all of our speakers. Thanks for being here. Really excited to get into this conversation with you. So I think we'll start with one question that we mentioned in the prep for this call, which is, we as part of the freedom movement, as part of this group of people and this movement of people that believe in the individual, why is it important that we talk about women's rights? We oftentimes you hear people talking about, it's about individuals, and what we want is, equal rights for everybody. So what makes it important for us to focus here on, as a freedom movement, what's our responsibility, and why is it important for us to talk about women specifically? So I think I'll start with Free Asanga first, and then we'll move through the group as people have comments to share. And again, as people join, I just wanted to remind everyone, please feel free to shoot messages and questions into the chat. We'd love to hear from you. So Free, if you could start us off.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you, everybody. And it's always a pleasure to share knowledge and experiences on such a wonderful topic that is so dear and close to us. Being a woman, I would like to say that every human being is free. Every woman is free. Every African woman is free in the mind, but there are obstacles along the way for us to express that freedom, because freedom is a universal right for everybody. But there are obstacles, and that is where the concern comes from, because we are free to do what we want to do, but there are certain obstacles that is preventing us. Now, those obstacles, coming back to the African continent, those obstacles are at several levels in a woman's life, several levels in a woman's environment. If we take, for example, the basic unit of our society, which is the home, we start getting obstacles for a young girl to express her entire potential, because in the home, we start determining gender roles. The girl child has to perform this kind of task while the boy child performs. And that in itself starts shaping the barriers that women face in later life. Now, we all know that to unleash our potential, we have to have a certain level of education. Coming back to our basic unit in the home, in Africa in particular, where the resources are limited, priority is given to the boy child. So that in itself are things that, as all of us in the freedom movement, trying to see that there's equality for women and men, we want to go back to the root cause of some of these inequalities, some of these hurdles, and address them, because unless we address the root causes of this, which are, like I say, are at the home level, societal level, the policy levels. So our customs and traditions also address or promote some of these inequalities that exist between men and women, or the boy child and the girl child. And to me, before we even talk about the bigger picture, we need to address the root causes. What are the root causes of some of these inequalities? Why do they exist? Then we can move on to the how. How do we overcome some of those obstacles? Maybe I end here and we'll continue the discussions as we go along.
Yeah, I would love to get into that with you about what are some of those root causes. Thank you so much, Free. And I think it's an important point. What we're talking about is an entire group of people that are systemically treated differently with both the law and, as you said, custom. So anybody else want to comment on this from the group? Perhaps Linda or Monia?
Yeah, sure. If you think about the history of the world in general, women were sort of left out in social participation, let me call it, if I may call it that. It's only until some years you saw women being allowed to vote in the US and in Europe. And so as we move on and things get better for us, we unfortunately still have these limitations, the barriers that Free just mentioned, that we are still limited into how much we can participate in the society in general. And if we come to our African continent, you find the influence of the same ancient, those religion and then our own cultural practices, or modern governing systems that adopted the colonial systems. We still find that women are left out. Women are not, and because we are not represented, some of the issues that are unique to us are not given attention. And during the pandemic, we saw a serious increase in gender-based violence cases. And because we don't have probably as many women as we want to in positions of power, then this doesn't end up being a national issue. And it ought to have been, because there's a generation of young people there, that now are young teen moms, probably dealing with mental health. Some of them, probably their lives have been damaged. That's one issue. And even the way we approached these sexual offenses when they happen, are they being taken seriously from a legal perspective? There are sometimes the question of the legal age of marriage is discussed in parliament. And whenever we hear how legislators speak of this, this has happened in Kenya, my country. And I remember there was a time in Nigeria, this was a discussion as well. The people who are speaking about the legal age of getting married, which is affecting the girl, they were throwing in 14, 16, but these are people who they cannot see the angle of what that means for a girl. And from our societies, if you are to lower the legal age of marriage, it means continuing to say it's okay not to take your daughters to school, there's no point. For a family, they would say there's no point of educating their daughter because she's going to get married anyway. So it would encourage something we're really trying to fight in getting more girls to get into school. There's also that imbalance that we find around the continent of access to education, where poor families prefer to sponsor their male children to go to school against their daughters. As I told you, they see them as maybe a source of income. When they get married, they'll get dowry, to the family. And these are just a few issues that I'm highlighting. Why women's rights? There's a common statement that is said, women's right is human rights. Women's right isn't unique to us. And we're not saying it to mean that we're a special class of people, but it's to fight that stereotype that women are second-class citizens. Women are human beings. We're maybe if I say we're equal to men, it's arguable, but see us as humans, as a human being, as a person, deserving of the human rights and access to them in equal measure.
Thank you so much, Linda. I really appreciate your perspectives there. And it's so important to point out, as you mentioned, there's so many facets of the different barriers that women face, reminding us that violence is the society's acceptance of violence toward women in many cultures is one of those things. So Monia, from your perspective, why is it important for Burundi, for your community, to talk about women's empowerment?
Thank you so much. In my case, the empowerment of women is crucial because it's led to the integral development of a country. And this means that to develop women is to develop not a society, that's a country. Concretely, I can say that the empowerment of women contributes in a larger proportion to family income that men according to our study, CDE, where 67% of Burundian women who have a later employment invest in a lot in their families compared to men. And the subject around empowerment of women is very important to me because it contributed to the individual development of my person and contribute to my economic development so that I can act for the rights of other women like me, do not have the chance to study but are beaten, raped and discriminated and engaged in short. I feel that I have a role to play like men in social change. And also if we look at Africa in general, today poverty still has a firmer face where poverty and literacy rates are very high among women and girls due to culturally motivated discrimination, especially in Burundi. Discrimination is in high level that reduce our dignity. And also, I think our movement, our freedom movement needs women like us, like Asanga, like Kavuka, like Fabian, like Casey, who understand the suffering of other women so that we can influence women's empowerment. And I think we understand the language of women who are discriminated against. So that is my point. And it's very important for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Monia. Thank you. It's such an important point about the ways that we can all be part of this together and inspire one another and sort of this effort to make sure that this is visible and doesn't get lost. Fabian, from your perspective, in the DRC and in the Great Lakes region that you are part of, what are two of the biggest challenges to women's economic empowerment in your community? You're on mute, Fabian.
Thank you everyone. So it's a great pleasure to participate at the African Liberty Forum. And I'm not very good at English, but I'm going to try. So the biggest challenge here in DRC, we can see in DRC, we found women that women are less likely to work than men, and like within agriculture, that is the largest economic sector here in DRC. Female farmers produce like 17.8% up to 10.9% less per hectare than male farmers. Moreover, women have like 75.3 lower wage earning than men. And another big challenge is sexual violences and domestic violences against women. So that's the biggest challenge here in DRC. And we as a freedom movement would like to promote women's access to position of influences in the same way as men. Also, we would like to enforce women's rights against all kinds of violences here in DRC. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Fabienne. Your English is terrific, and I speak only one language, so I'm very impressed by you. I guess let's go from there and, thinking about, okay, some of the biggest challenges that we're seeing, and come back to Free Asonga's point about what the root causes are, so that then we can sort of get into what we can do about it. So Free, why don't we go back to you and get into some of that discussion of, okay, if we're talking about these barriers, women don't have access to leadership positions. They are facing domestic and sexual violence. And on top of all of that, a lot of legal barriers that make it harder to participate in the workforce, as well as sort of disproportionate burdens when it comes to housework and childcare, for example. What are some of the root causes of that from your perspective?
Well, Cassie, from my perspective, I have a tripartite way of looking at the root causes. One, we have our customs and traditions. Our customs and traditions, as Africans, we hold strong onto them because that is the identity that we have given to ourselves, and we in a way do not want to lose that identity. Don't get me wrong, there are good parts, there's some good aspects of our customs. But what is difficult is that those repressive aspects of the customs have to be addressed in order for women to be, if you permit me use the word, liberated. I'll give you just some of these customs I'm talking about. We have areas where, till date, there is still female genital mutilation going on. And surprisingly, in some of this area, it is the women themselves who hold firmly onto it to say, we're not going to lose this tradition. It's something we've gone through. There's nothing wrong, so our children have to go through that. There's a lot of work that is going on, but it has to be done. It has to be eliminated. For, like Monia mentioned, the aspect of that psychological trauma. Once a child goes through female genital mutilation, you cannot expect that girl child to express herself fully, to unleash her full potential, because she's already carrying a burden with her by undergoing that. In Cameroon, there are some areas where they do what they call breast ironing to prevent the child's breast from developing at a tender age. So those are some of the traditions that we're fighting on that needs to be eliminated. There are traditions and customs that do not permit women to go to work. The woman is a wife material and good for only reproduction, to childbearing. So that, I would say, needs to be addressed. Now, when we look at the other part, there's a religious aspect. We hold, whether it is the African traditional religion, or it is the Christian religion or Islamic, there are issues in religion that do not favor the woman to express herself and needs to be addressed. I'll just give you an example. When a woman is getting married as a Christian, they tell the man to love the wife and they tell the wife to obey the husband. That's already a discriminatory, the battleground for, or the level ground for marriage is already discriminatory. So the husband does not respect or obey the wife or does not discuss, because religious wise has been given the order for the wife only to obey the husband and not vice versa. So there is no respect, inequality in respect. I can go on and on with religion. Now we come now to my third aspect, is the regulatory aspect. We have repressive laws. Some of the laws in themselves are not repressive, but their application is repressive to women's evolution. So some of these issues I deem are the root causes of where we are today and why we are fighting that women should have equal rights and like men. They should have equal political rights, equal access to education, equal access to land, equal access to property, so that we can unleash the potential that is in us. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you, Free. Such important, and as you mentioned, traumatizing aspects of this that we're dealing with. And it's a reminder that the society, the open society that we're promoting as a movement is not only about the law. And it's important that we recognize when women are being sort of systemically kept down, or when an entire group of people are being systemically treated differently, and sort of prevented from, as I said before, making their own life's choices and setting their own life's course. And as Free mentioned, being able to confidently navigate life. So we have a couple of folks in the room that have recently joined. So I just wanted to welcome everyone to contribute to the chat if you're interested in asking a question or commenting on the conversation. We'd even welcome you to raise your hand if you'd like to join in via audio. So I guess we'll move to Linda Kabuka now. So related to what Free was talking about, these big challenges that feel so heavy and almost insurmountable, right? What is the role of the freedom movement then in promoting economic empowerment, promoting prosperity and agency for women across Africa?
Well, that's a very tough question. And thank you, Casey. So, Free just touched the tip of the iceberg. And if we were to delve into the conversation she's having, there is so much to uncover, regards the trauma and the challenges that women are facing. And we freedom advocates and people who believe in free markets know that one main way of helping human beings, or now helping women emancipate themselves, is by giving them economic empowerment. So what is our role as think tanks? And I can think of two ways. And one is our own role in maybe contributing to policy advisory to governments. So, it will surprise you to find out that women around Africa still cannot own property in their own right or land. In this day and age, they can't get a legal title to their property or land. And in my country, thank God, there was a change in the law included in property to be able to own property. And for us African people, inheritance is a big thing in our culture. So this also means if you look at our respective African cultures, they are patriarchal, meaning a woman cannot inherit. From majority of our communities, there are only like maybe 1% of African communities that are matriarchal and allow women to own family property, but majority of them do not allow female children or of the homestead to own property. So this was adopted into legal, modern governments, and women continue to be locked out. So the only way you can get any right to property is through marriage, through your husband. So your father cannot bequeath you their property, and you cannot even purchase it in your own name. So you see, our role as think tanks is to bring this out and propose improvements in policy on the importance of people owning property. And this will encourage any person when you can work towards something and own it. There is that pride and pride and happiness and fulfillment when you own something that you have worked for. It motivates you to keep on working because at the end of it, you're going to own it. And if you're a mother, you leave it behind for children. It's a legacy you leave behind. So we need to do a lot of research on this and find out, the countries where this is still happening and where women cannot own property. Try and find out the underlying challenges to them, what are the reasons, and then propose policy solutions that these governments can take up to reform their law. And if we have partners in these countries, probably work together with them in developing those propositions to improving the policy. Another angle is we can also do sensitization. And unfortunately right now, I don't know why, but very few have projects that are related to economic empowerment of women. Now, this is it's a top topic in Africa at the moment. So there's a lot of funding, and a lot of national and non-governmental organizations have projects and programs that are dealing with economic empowerment of women. However, this isn't the case within the libertarian community. And I can think of maybe CDE and Free who are taking up, have projects specifically for economic empowerment. So probably Atlas being our main supporter in the continent to consider, having a pathway where it will encourage think tanks to come up with projects that will sensitize or even just do advocacy or create awareness of economic empowerment. We're being left behind. Everyone else is contributing to improving the economic empowerment of men in Africa. And I think we need to now let our voices be heard as well as the libertarian community of the continent. So the last thing is, if we do take up respective projects related to women economic empowerment, it means our think tanks will now need to create platforms where women who are interested in this or who don't know are able to come and learn. So through our think tanks, to create platforms where we teach people about economic empowerment, the importance of empowering women, women to know some sort of their rights. We will uncover so many things that I know CDE are finding out in their projects, of those barriers that they're facing and the challenges, and together we can come up with solutions. We may be able to create those communities and also contribute to improving economic empowerment, and being a supporter of economic empowerment in the continent.
Oh, there's so much great content there, Linda. I really appreciate you touching on the important point that throughout the centuries, giving women opportunity to making sure that women have opportunity to have their own finances and investments and be able to reap the benefits of work has been a driving force for their independence and their rights. So as advocates for free society and equality before the law, freeing markets for women can go a really long way. To your point, though, and Free's point as well, and all of our speakers, there are these cultural people hang on to these cultural resistance to that idea in some ways. And I know that CDE, you mentioned that CDE, Great Lakes, and I think the CDE DRC as well works on both this inheritance topic when it comes to property rights, as well as sort of just sensitizing communities to the benefits of ensuring that women have equal opportunity. Monia, can you tell us about some of the work that you've done for women's rights in Burundi?
Sorry. Yes, what we did in CDE for women in Burundi. A while ago in CDE was working on a project called Why Women, which aims to influence a law that recognizes women's right to inherit land in order to improve their lives, because we believe that the absence in this environment, Burundi lose the value that those women could bring to the Burundian economy. We conducted a series of research studies around equality before women's inheritance law in Burundi to mobilize public opinion and parliamentary support for the adoption of inheritance bill, but also we have produced various video, more than 15 analytical articles carried out media campaign, but above all, we continue to mobilize women so that they can defend their rent rights. And also, I think that we must open opportunities for positions in our respective institutions by involving more in priorities of our organization. That is an impact for our project, our Why Women project, in Kirundi, our local language. And also, as Kafka mentioned, I'm sorry, I can add some challenges, as Linda said. Two big challenges there are so many challenges, but I can mention also two. The role of our movement is to develop and initiate local solutions that identify the culture and legal barriers that block the empowerment, the challenge to block empowerment of today, and works towards mechanisms that will restore the dignity of millions of African women and girls, but also the movement must contribute to changing the mortality of women who remain blocked by customers and religion and culture, which is a big challenge in Africa, especially in Great Lake region and in Burundi, so that they can work up to defend their rights. And also, the role of our movement is to develop and initiate local solutions that identify the culture and the regular barriers that block the empowerment today, but also movement must contribute to change the mortality of women. And another challenge is access to land and the culture mortality that blocks women from opening their eyes to defend their right, because in Burundi, culture is like something big, and this culture block so many women in Burundi and in Great Lake region. That is our two big challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Monia. The inheritance question is such an important point, and I know that a lot of Atlas Network partners, several, have decided to work on this issue when it comes to inheritance. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the ability to own land in general. And then we also have seen in Cameroon, for example, these barriers to women being able to take economic activity, go into economic activity without proving that they're married, and different things like that. So there's even sort of this level of discriminating based on marriage status as well that we see. So I know that Nkafu has been trying to address some of this. Can you tell us about the progress that you've made? Is there anything that it's been encouraging, and maybe any setbacks that you've had?
Okay, thank you, Casey. First, I agree with what Linda and Monia have all said, but from my experience, there is in Cameroon, there is a total lack of faith in the government. And when we look at women, most women are engaged in very small businesses or small and medium-sized enterprises. And I would say 90% of those are in the informal sector. So they're not known. It's like having a child who has no birth certificate. It's not known that that person exists. So the government doesn't know they exist. And they don't have faith in the government to make their businesses known by the government. That keeps them out of so many benefits that they could have to grow their businesses. So we have a catch-23 situation in which we're trying to encourage the women to register their businesses. And you know how government policies work. It's a game of numbers, statistics. If you know that 10,000 women are engaged in a particular activity, then you can advocate for better policies towards. But one, it is not known because these businesses are not registered. It becomes a challenge to put forward now to say, these are things that with female-owned businesses, the barriers that they are facing, and these are some of the policy changes that we're advocating for. When you put forward that, then it's a female-owned businesses. We're talking about maybe a handful of female-owned businesses. Why would the government be concerned about that? So that's the first challenge. And that is one of the areas in which we're working towards having female businesses registered so that they can be counted and they can increase now the advocacy that we're doing for towards having a level playing ground for them. Another aspect that we are facing is not in laws themselves, but the interpretation of laws. In some cases, I take an example. To register a business, you have 13 procedures or items that need to be compiled, but for a woman, it's 14. Because that for a woman, a married woman, you have to produce your marriage certificate. But for a married man, you're not asked to produce proof of marriage. This in itself is discriminatory because when we're talking, the women that we are talking about is not you and I. We're talking about women who would need to be cautioned, who are at a certain level of education. And those who are even married, the marriage certificate is in the keeping of their husbands. So they don't have access to that marriage certificate. It becomes a very big, but although it is just one document, which might not seem important, but it becomes a very huge barrier when you contextualize what these women will face in order to have access to that document, to produce that document, be it at the level of a microfinance institution to have access to loan or to even register their business. So those are some of the points we are working on to say the ground needs to be level. If you're asking for marriage certificate, you should ask from both the man and the woman. If you deem that marriage certificate is not good, then the woman does not need to justify her marriage by producing her marriage certificate. So those are some of the issues that we are looking on, and we say the ground needs to be level for women to also, because sometimes women get frustrated, and that's why they just stay with their small and medium or with their very small enterprises and continue in the cycle of poverty, because they cannot get out of it if they're not able to expand their businesses and conquer new markets. And so, thank
It's
you.
an important insight there about getting discouraged and losing hope, because, you know, economic historian Deirdre McCloskey talks about this a lot in her work. You know, it's so important for people to believe that they can change their economic circumstances. Just the idea that that's possible and that hope makes it much more likely. And so the freedom movement has this responsibility to say, okay, where can we find places for hope? Where can we find places to say we can make sure that you have the opportunity to improve your circumstances? So on that note, I'd love to hear, since we only have about 15 minutes left of this session, I'd love to hear from all of you, you know, any inspiring stories of change that give you hope, whether that is in your specific community, in your country, or in the continent, whether that's a story about another organization or about your own. I'd love for the audience to hear from you what gives you hope and inspires you to say, okay, we can achieve this. We can find a way to bring empowerment to women across the continent. So Fabienne, maybe we can start with you. Do you have an inspiring story for us about change that gives you hope for the future?
All right, thank you. I will start that, say that gender equity is the key. We all know that. And women's economic empowerment include women's ability to participate equally in existing markets, their access to control over productive resources, access to decent works, control over their own time, lives, and bodies, and increase voice, agency, and meaningful participation in economic decisions. So as Linda said, in African country, women can only inherit or own property if they have maybe brothers or male guardian or relative who oversees over their money. So women are, we can feel that women are at the front line, taking care of children, families, elders, and the most vulnerable population, but they're also the driving force behind our advancement in science, researches, and competitiveness for all. In our society, people think that women cannot have it all. Like if they have to be a good mother, they have to accept to partly. So we as acts now to ensure that people change those mindsets. Now more than ever, we feel the sense of emergency, the necessity to embrace inclusion and diversity in women's leadership. So we, as CBEDRC, we worked on a project last year in 2021 called Promote Women's Rights, and we got satisfying results. We have won a local reform that facilitates small businesses for women who exercise cross-border traffic between the city of Gisenyi in Rwanda and the city of Goma here in DRC by reducing the number of their taxes. We also we changed public opinion on this sector. Like we all have those institutions that work on women's rights, but we are here like to push them, to make them in practice somehow. So we also, with this project, have directly affected thousands of people. That is to say 100 of signature of a petition requesting the reform of law on women's economy. And right now we are working on another project called Free Enterprises for Women. That's a project we are working on right now. With that project, we would like to reduce the number of documents required to start a business for women, like the fees, also the fees of a woman to start a business from $200 to $50. And the time to get those documents from 72 hours to 24 hours. We would also like to reform, will increase the advantage of women in small and medium enterprises. That's what we are working on right now. And I would just to mention an example of a woman, this woman called Justine Masika Bihamba. She's from DRC, here in Kivu. She's the president of an organization called Synergie des Femmes. It's a woman organization based here in Goma in DRC. They offer support to women who are victims of sexual violences and work to establish a lasting peace here in Kivu, in the east of the country. She also worked on the eco-political participation to women in DRC in 2018. They wanted to put pressure on the DRC government to implement policies which truly promote women's participation in decision-making and women's candidature for election that year. So thank you.
Thank you, Fabienne. It's a reminder, your comments are a reminder that burdensome government policy disproportionately affects people with constrained, limited resources, right? So that means that those burdensome policies that are nonsense and just are, efforts by the government to control and get revenue are disproportionately affecting women and people with less access to opportunity. So when we think about, the disproportionate number of women who are trading across borders, those trade barriers disproportionately impact their ability to make a living and support their families. Thank you so much, Fabienne. We really admire the work that your team is doing in the DRC. So we'll move on then let's go to Linda Kavuka. Can you talk to us about, you work across the continent with your work with African Students for Liberty. So you have a lot of visibility into many different communities. So from your perspective, can you give us something that is inspiring you and keeping you hopeful about the potential to solve some of these problems?
Okay, so the title of my story is The Power of Collective Action. And I will tell you about something that has just happened very, very recently, just maybe a few weeks ago. So we just concluded our general elections here in Kenya. And for the very first time, we have over 35 women who have been elected into various, who've been voted into various elective posts. So to someone else, this can't be, a big deal in a number of, we have like over 1,000 legislators, but to us, this is such a huge, huge win that, people went and voted them in. They were not nominated into these seats. And how did this happen? So as I said, this is due to the power of collective action of different impacts and different efforts being put in by different organizations. So the first is the Kenyan Constitution. We have we can say new constitution that it was passed in 2010. And in it, there is affirmative action that is implemented into some clauses of the Constitution. And you can see this coming to life where, for example, no seat shall have more than 2/3 from a specific gender. So that's supposed to be in all government roles. So, and the aim is to try and balance the genders, because it was overwhelmingly filled by men, and that's what the situation around the continent. And the constitution also brought in a new elective position in parliament, and it's called the woman representative position. So this ensured that every county, Kenya is divided into 47 counties, had a woman representative, and this lady would represent her constituents in parliament. So this was the first time that we saw a high number of women get into parliament, at least at a minimum of 47 for the 47 counties that we have. So this began when we implemented that constitution. So we first saw it in 2013, again 2017. So we've had 10 years of experimenting with that woman representative. And this ended up being a gateway to open up, give access to women who are interested in politics in the country to first try out, like get in through the woman representative role. And later on, they got the courage and support to be able to contest for other higher roles. And for the very first time, we have had women who have been voted into a very powerful seat, and that is the governor's seat in Kenya. So the governor has access to a lot of funding. They manage an entire county. Kenya is divided into 47 counties. So for the first time now, we're seeing women in a very high position of leadership, where they'll be managing resources, they'll be making policy. We also have some of those women have been voted in as members of parliament, not only women representatives, but they are full members of parliament, and they represent a ward, like a constituency. Remember, parliament is where people make laws. So now we have women who have the power to bring in bills that would be, specific to women's issues. We can argue and say, but well, we already have women representatives, and unfortunately they haven't done so much. But to me, this is a huge inspiration that, small efforts that are put in for many years, one day will bring in results. The constitution is one thing. We also have a lot of programs around Kenya where there's a lot of empowerment for women. So I grew up in a time where, I knew there was a lot of sensitization about importance of the girl child going to school, because, in the early 90s, it was still a dark time. Many girls didn't go to school, but because of that constant remembrance, projects and efforts by non-governmental institutions and individuals, then has come my generation of young women who have had access to high-level education. We have seen what the country looked like in a time where girls didn't have access to education. And now we are contributing to our societies, working, teaching, in business, making money. So this really inspires me that you may not realize the impact of little action that you put in and the kind of change it will bring about. So this is an inspiration to me and to all of us who are here, that even though whatever we are trying to fight seems like a big mountain, the little efforts and the changes that we'll bring in and the actions that we'll put in will have a ripple effect. And in one way, in one day, we'll have a big change, and we will no longer be talking about economic empowerment for women. It will be the thing of the past.
That's exciting, Linda, for your country, and hopefully many communities across Africa will be seeing that as well. Obviously, affirmative action is one of those things that is hotly debated among the freedom movement. Is, as you mentioned, the benefits of having women in positions of power for that different perspective and to bring their experience to policy is so crucial. And how can we do that in a way that isn't necessarily coming from the top down and mandated? And as you point out, lots of this is pushed by all of these private non-governmental sources or actors sort of over time influencing the culture and keeping this issue top of mind and allowing these kinds of things to be possible. So thank you so much. So let's move to Monia. So from your perspective, I guess, like, focus on Burundi, perhaps. Is there an example of change that you feel inspired by right now?
Yes, we'll talk about the impact for women. I've talked it before, but I can talk it again. As I mentioned, I think that we must open up opportunities for positions in our respective institutions by involving more in the priorities of organizations. And CDE was working on a project, Why Women, in our local language, which aims to influence a law that recognizes women's rights to inherit land in order to improve their lives, because we believe that the absence in the environment Burundi lose the value that those women could bring to the Burundian economy. Conducted a series of research around equality before women's inheritance law in Burundi to mobilize public opinion and parliamentary support for the adoption of the inheritance bill. But also we have produced various video, more than 12 analytical activities, carried out media campaigns, but above all, we continue to mobilize women so that they can defend their land rights. And we have an example. She's a woman who's called Esperance Daishimiye. Esperance, it means hope, a widow of 6 children. This woman, she lives in the west of Burundi, and for her to survive, she'll have an income and land, because land is very important in Burundi because of 90% of Burundian are farmers. And through the reform carried out by our project Why Women, today Esperance has helped to this land, because she can save money and invest in that land. So it's for her, or for Burundian, it's like a small thing, but now Esperance, she can give something to it to her children, and also she can also have a dream and dream big because of this big reform that Why Women did. And that is an example for us in CDE and for the whole Burundian and the Good Luck region. Thank you.
Thank you, Monia. CDE is such an inspiration, I think, to Linda's points earlier about your willingness to lead on this topic despite the challenges and despite the fact that the freedom movement historically has not engaged in this question as much as this panel has highlighted as necessary in Africa. And we're so grateful for groups like CDE Great Lakes and CDE DRC and COFU for being willing to step into this space and then create such important impact as you highlight. I mean, just actually life-changing impact for women in your communities. Pretty amazing. So Free, I guess we'll go to you then. You know, whether it's in Cameroon or somewhere else, where are you feeling encouraged?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I would like to just continue from where, Linda mentioned the power of collective action. What really makes me think that there is hope is in Cameroon, young girls are very vulnerable, and young girls from poor homes are even more vulnerable. Female enrollment in secondary school is very low, and female dropout rates are very high. And this dropout rate, most of the time, is attributed to teenage pregnancy. And one of the issues that has been raised by almost every civil society organization, every women-led organization, is the fact that when a child gets pregnant in school, the child is sent out of school. The girl child is sent out of school. But the boy child who impregnated the girl child is left in school. And we know how much education is important for women's empowerment. So automatically you have condemned that girl child, whereas she is not responsible alone for her pregnancy. So this fight has been going on, from almost all civil society organizations in Cameroon, advocating for, if the girl child is leaving school, the boy child needs to leave school, because both of them are responsible for the pregnancy. And just a few months ago, I think about 2 or 3 months ago now, the Minister of Secondary Education now came out with a decree that says any pregnant girl child should not be sent out of school. The girl child has to stay in school until she is due delivery. And during that period, the school should arrange for a way where she can get homeschooled in order not to lose, to be at par with her classmates. That to me gives hope, because that single action is going to change a lot, gives a lot of opportunities for girls who have been dropping out of school due to teenage pregnancy. And it gives hope to say it doesn't matter how long we push forward. Sometimes it might take 10 years, but it can come to pass. So that is what really gives me hope to continue the fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Free. Yeah, it's so interesting to think about the ways that you have to understand the local context to push for some of these things that then create the outcome that you want, which is that these young girls who are pregnant are able to continue school. And the way that was navigated is understanding the context of people have to see the impact on the male students if it were applied the same. So Monia, did you have an additional comment here? I think I saw your hand.
Yes, I can add the reform that I mentioned, which is health experience. From the work that we did today at CDE, the government through the President of the Republic of Burundi just recognized that men and women in Burundi must enrich without discrimination. And the legislature must respect this equality between men and women. That is a word from the president of, and women in Burundi when it comes to inheriting land, but also our work has already enabled a series of reform, and those reform are the adoption of the reform of the access of the land court, directing the access of wives to land titles. The government adopted the reform of the personal and family code to recognize the existence of women in land management. Before, women did not have the right to manage the income from the land. Now they can freely cultivate and sell the product of their labor. And finally, in recent months, there has been the centralization of the process of settling inheritance by giving local communities the ability to settle land and inheritance disputes, which gives priority to equality before the law between men and women. Women in Burundi thrive the Health Council. Previously, the Department of Justice was solely responsible of those regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Monia. Another example of the inspiring work of CDE Great Lakes in Burundi. So we are almost out of time. I wanted to make sure that the audience has an opportunity to ask a question or two, if there are any. So I'll wait just a few seconds for that. If you do have a comment or question, go ahead and put it in the chat or raise your hand on the function at the bottom on the bar there below your screen. We have a comment in the chat that says, let's boost entrepreneurship as a means of saving our economies. And women must be at the center of this development, right? So it's so important. Our community of think tanks have this opportunity to point out the ways that women are disproportionately affected and burdened by barriers to entrepreneurship across the continent. Thank you, Barakana. So I guess I'll try to have our panelists end with one last word. So I guess I would ask you to speak to your fellow think tankers across the African continent about if you had to give one sentence about one comment, why it's important for our movement in Africa to talk about these issues, what would you tell them? So let's start with Linda, and then we'll move to Monia after that.
Okay, women are not second-class citizens, and we need to put in effort in women's rights in order to show people that women are humans as well, and we are one. There is no division, and no gender is better than the other.
Thanks, Linda. Fabian, from your perspective, if you had to talk to the network in Africa, what would you say, is the most important point to make in terms of why this is something that our movement needs to step into?
Okay, thank you. I would just like to mention that apart from those laws that states women's rights, we as society, we have to do something for well-being of women. So we can start with small things like maybe telling those women in our lives that we care about them, like they can be our mother, our sisters, our teacher, our neighbor. And we can also use our voice to help keep girls in school, because when they stay in schools and finish at least their secondary education, we made so many good things happen to them and their families. When girls, like even those girls will get pregnant maybe at a young age, we can also help them with their babies. We can also support those women who start their small businesses or medium businesses, maybe with something like a loan or just funds in order to support them, apart from the law that states women's rights. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Thank you, Fabian. We're almost out of time, so we'll close out with Priya Sangha. So Pri, if you could just give us one last sentence about, to persuade our movement, if you had to persuade our movement to step into and engage with this topic, what would you say?
Thank you, Casey. I would like to address women in leadership within the movement. And that is to say, we need to encourage other women to get into leadership position, because as many women get into leadership position, we'll be able to address this issue. There will be many hands on deck to address this issue, and we should be mindful of the Queen Bee syndrome, because that is what is going to drag us back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pri. It's an important point. Only 20% of Atlas Network partners are headed by a woman. So we have a lot of work to do in that respect of sort of access to leadership within our own movement and platforming women's leadership voices in our own movement, and making sure we're thinking about the benefits of that, the benefits of having female voices in the leadership of our movement, and what that might do to persuade others to join us. So thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for the panel, for all of your incredible insights, and of course, the important and crucial work that you do to promote equal economic and legal and cultural rights for women across the African continent. You're an inspiration for all of us, and we really appreciate you being here. Thanks, everybody, for joining.